just a few feet away, and he didn't even notice. The hands that once moved faster than the eye could follow now quivered under the dim glow of hospital lights. The man who had once danced beneath roaring crowds sat quietly, surrounded not by cheers, but by the steady hum of machines. No cameras, no applause, no booming voice echoing through arenas, only silence. Muhammad Ali had once ruled the ring with rhythm and power. He floated, he teased, he dominated. Entire countries paused just to watch him move, to hear him speak. His voice filled stadiums, his confidence shaped history. But time has a way of quieting even the loudest legends. And in the end, what remained was a man facing an opponent he could not outfight. How does someone who once controlled every second in the ring end up here? How does the greatest meet something that doesn't react to speed, pride, or determination? The real story was never just in the victories. It lived in the quieter moments, behind closed doors, in sleepless nights, in the stillness when the cameras were gone. The world saw a champion. His wife saw the price of becoming one. Before the silence, there was electricity. Before the tremor, there was rhythm. Long before the diagnosis, before the slow steps and careful movements, there was a young man in Louisville who believed he was destined for more. Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. didn't begin as a legend. He started as a teenager whose stolen bicycle led him into a boxing gym and onto a path that would change everything. What followed wasn't just talent, it was speed unlike anything the heavyweight division had seen. He didn't move like the others, he glided. His combinations confused trainers who struggled to understand what they were witnessing. Then came 1964. When he stepped into the ring against Sonny Liston, most expected him to be humbled. Instead, the world watched something entirely different. He predicted the outcome. He stood victorious, and he announced himself without hesitation. Soon after, he took a new name, Muhammad Ali, and with it, a new identity. It wasn't just personal, it was cultural, political, transformational. Then came sacrifice. He refused to serve in the Vietnam War. Titles were taken, licenses revoked. Years of his prime disappeared in legal battles. For many fighters, that would have ended everything. For Ali, it became part of his story. When he returned, the fights meant more than rankings. They carried weight. The showdown with Joe Frazier, the brutal clash in Manila, the strategic brilliance against George Foreman in 1974, where he absorbed punishment before reclaiming the crown. Each fight added something deeper. He wasn't just winning, he was proving something. America didn't just watch him, it reacted to him. Some admired him, others criticized him, but no one ignored him. He became more than an athlete, he became a symbol. And symbols don't fade overnight. They wear down slowly. For Ali, the change didn't come from one moment, it came from years. By the mid-1970s, the toll of those battles had begun to show. The famous fight in Manila wasn't just courage, it was endurance pushed to the edge. 15 grueling rounds left both men forever changed. Ali later said it felt like dying. At the time, it sounded heroic. Later, it sounded like a warning. His style began to shift. Early on, he relied on speed and movement, but over time, he took more hits. The rope-a-dope strategy worked brilliantly once, but repeated damage carries consequences. The body remembers everything, even when pride refuses to. Small signs began to appear, slight delays in timing, slower reactions, subtle changes in speech. Nothing obvious, nothing undeniable, just enough to notice if you were looking closely. But most people weren't, because outside the ring, he was still
the greatest. Confidence had always been his shield. To step away would mean admitting limits, and limits didn't fit the image he had built. Then came defeat. Leon Spinks shocked the world in 1978. Ali won the title back, but something had shifted. By the time he faced Larry Holmes and Trevor Berbick, the difference was clear. The speed was gone. The rhythm had changed. But no one said it out loud. Not the media, not the promoters, not even Ali. Still, the change was happening. He was no longer controlling time. He was chasing it. Publicly, everything seemed the same. He was still introduced as a champion, still invited to events, still admired wherever he went. When he entered a room, people stood. But behind that image, something else was unfolding. His movement slowed, his speech softened, pauses stretched longer. Conversations that once flowed like lightning now felt measured. Those closest to him noticed first. Among them was Lonnie Williams, someone who had known him for years and would later become his wife. She saw what the world couldn't: the effort behind simple actions, the frustration when his hands didn't respond the way they once had. To the public, he was still legendary. At home, he was learning patience. His personal life had always been complicated. Fame creates distance. Travel takes time away from family. While he built a global identity, everyday life moved further out of reach. It wasn't neglect, it was focus. The same mindset that made him unstoppable also made it difficult to admit he was slowing down. Pride had protected him for years, but pride can also isolate. Then, in 1984, the truth was given a name: Parkinson's disease. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it came quietly, like the condition itself. The tremors had an explanation, the slower speech had a reason. The fight had been there all along, and this time there were no rounds, no referee, no victory bell. He didn't collapse overnight. He kept showing up. Public appearances, charity work, causes that mattered to him. But everything required planning. Energy had to be managed. Rest became essential. Lonnie's role changed. She became his support system, organizing, protecting, guiding. Financially, the pressure didn't disappear either. Maintaining a legacy is different from building one. Expenses, management, long-term care, it all adds up. And then there was the silence. The arenas were gone. The chants faded. The noise turned into quiet rooms and careful conversations. Even public appearances felt different, not weaker, just softer. The world didn't turn away. It simply watched with a different kind of respect. There was no villain here, no single moment to blame. It was time. It was impact. It was the cost of everything he had endured. Lonnie later spoke of his strength, not in fighting, but in acceptance. The dignity he carried, the way he still connected with people. The tremor didn't take away who he was, but the change was permanent. This wasn't a sudden fall. It was gradual, step by step. The man who once dictated every moment inside the ring was now adjusting to a life where control looked different. There was no dramatic ending, no final punch, just time moving forward. He had conquered opponents across the world. He had stood against governments. He had reclaimed titles and rewritten history. But this fight was different. This wasn't about willpower. It was about reality. Years passed quietly. Public appearances became fewer, more controlled. Then came a moment the world would never forget. the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. He stepped forward, holding the torch. His hands trembled, but his gaze remained steady. As the flame rose, the stadium fell silent, not out of absence, but out of understanding. It wasn't about dominance anymore. It was about dignity. At home, life moved at a different pace. Simple tasks required time. Conversations slowed. Days became structured. Lonnie stayed by his side, protecting his space, managing requests, ensuring the man wasn't lost behind the legend. Visitors noticed the change, but also something familiar. The presence was still there, quieter but unmistakable. A glance, a smile, a nod. The body had slowed, but the awareness remained. For those who remembered the speed, the contrast was powerful. The man who once moved like poetry now conserved energy for small gestures. The world around him became smaller, but not empty. The crowds were gone, replaced by letters, visits, foundations built in his name. The spotlight dimmed, not out of neglect, but necessity. The fight had changed. It was no longer about titles. It was about holding on to dignity. He once controlled the pace of every fight. Now time controlled him. And yet he never spoke with bitterness. No complaints, no blame, just adaptation.
A champion adjusting to a battle with no judges and no clear end. For those who remembered the thunder, the silence felt overwhelming. But within that silence, the truth became clear. Greatness always comes at a cost. He had spent a lifetime convincing the world he was untouchable. His words were bold, his movements flawless, his presence larger than life. For years it held. But time doesn't negotiate. The same hands that once struck with lightning eventually rested. The same voice that filled arenas softened. What remained was the man. Not the spectacle, not the myth, just the truth. His wife never revealed scandal. She revealed something heavier. The cost. The effort behind each movement. The quiet strength it took to accept change. The discipline required not to win, but to endure. He had conquered the world, but the hardest opponent was never in the ring. It was consequence, the accumulation of years, the price of greatness. The gloves were long gone, the belts put away. The cheers became memories, but the cost never truly left. And maybe that's the final truth. Not that he was invincible, not that he was broken, but that true greatness always asks for something in return.